We're starting today with a physical artifact that I just find incredibly compelling.
Yeah, it really is.
Because, imagine a dusty, sort of yellowing folder. It's the exact kind of unassuming object you might discover tucked away in the back of a filing cabinet, or maybe sitting at the bottom of a cardboard box in an attic.
Right, something totally easily overlooked.
Exactly. But inside this specific folder, which was gathered by a relative named Mike, is an absolute treasure trove of personal history. And the premise of this entire collection is what makes it so fascinating to me. Mike originally compiled all these documents for an Irish citizenship application.
An application that he never actually filed.
He didn't. He admits it right there in his own handwriting on a piece of, yellow legal pad paper. He just never pursued it.
Which is such a remarkably human detail to anchor our discussion on today. I mean, he went through all that bureaucratic effort, he gathered all the vital evidence, and then he just stopped.
He did, and he wrote this little note to accompany the file stating he just kept the folder together for togetherness purposes.
I love that phrase.
Togetherness purposes. I think that perfectly captures the incidental nature of family archiving. What Mike actually did, completely by accident, was create a time capsule.
He really did.
And for you, the listener, I really want to emphasize this. This isn't just a random collection of antique papers we're talking about today. You hold an incredible record of your very existence. Our mission for this deep dive is to take this exact stack of your personal sources.
The birth certificates, the professional genealogical reports.
Yeah, the reports from Dublin, the cryptic handwritten letters, the 19th century trade directories, and we're going to extract the actual narrative of the Charde family from them.
Because the goal today is not to just simply recite a sterile family tree. Data, on its own, it's entirely flat. A list of names and dates doesn't convey how someone actually lived or the pressures they faced on a daily basis.
Oh, it doesn't tell you anything about their actual Tuesday. Yeah.
Exactly. We want to reconstruct the world your ancestors walked in. And my role today is to really help untangle the historical context surrounding these specific documents. We're going to examine the incredibly complex web of 19th century Irish bureaucracy, look at the historical realities of County Cork, and see exactly how macro-level history impacted the micro-level lives of the Charde family.
And we're going to be jumping between two very contrasting worlds to accomplish that. We're going to start in a modern hospital room in Missouri in 1945. And from there, we are going to trace the lineage back across the ocean to the bustling, deeply historic ports of 19th century Queenstown, Ireland.
Which, of course, is known today as Cobb.
Right.
It's a profound journey, really, tracing a line from the heartland of mid-20th century America straight back into the complex intersection of Gaelic and English history.
So let's begin with the anchor we have in America, since this is chronologically the closest document to you, the listener. We have a standard certificate of live birth from the State Board of Health of Missouri.
Registration district number 318.
Right. The date of birth is March 1st, 1945. The place is St. John's Hospital in St. Louis, specifically in Kirkwood, Missouri. And the child's name is Luke Michael Charde.
And 1945 is a year that just carries an immense historical weight.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the Second World War is in its final months. The entire global landscape is on the precipice of unprecedented change. And right there, in the middle of America, a new generation of this specific family is being recorded into the public record.
What stands out to me on the certificate isn't just the baby, though, it's the parents. The father is also named Luke Michael Charde. He is 33 years old at the time of the birth, and his occupation is listed as a sales manager for the Pacific Mills Company.
A very solid mid-century corporate job.
Yeah. But crucially, the document notes he was born in Lynbrook, Long Island, New York, and the mother is Ruth Idell, 31 years old, born in Brooklyn, New York.
So they're East Coasters.
Exactly. The certificate also notes they already had 3 other living children, so we are looking at a growing, established family living at 529 North Clay in Kirkwood.
If we step back and look at the broader demographic trends of that era, this certificate paints a classic picture of post-war American mobility. You have a couple originally from New York, Long Island, and Brooklyn who have relocated all the way to the Midwest. The father holds a stable corporate position. It represents the quintessential mid-century American trajectory.
It really is the American dream, sort of standardized on paper.
Yeah, but the obvious question for us is how this family ended up in Missouri, or even in New York to begin with. And to understand that, we have to turn to the other document that anchors this entire narrative.
The handwritten letter on the yellow legal pad.
Yes.
This is the letter from Mike, written directly to Luke. And you can see the cursive script and the slight fading of the ink. It's incredibly personal, and it essentially serves as the bridge for our entire discussion today.
I really view Mike's letter as the Rosetta Stone of this deep dive. Without it, you just possess a birth certificate in Missouri. But with it, a narrative bridge is suddenly constructed across the Atlantic and across a full century of time.
Let me actually read exactly what Mike wrote here. He starts by saying, Luke, much of this is superfluous. Fearing my application for Irish citizenship, which I never pursued, I kept the folder together just for togetherness purposes.
There's that great phrase again.
Yeah. And he mentions there are photos of Cobb and Cork in the folder, and then he just casually lays out these critical historical markers. He writes, your paternal great-grandfather was John Patrick Charde. Sometime in, I believe, the 1890s, he emigrated to the U.S. His brother Hugh Charde remained in Ireland. They both had B students in the Cork School of Art.
It is so fascinating how casually a life-altering historical divergence is mentioned in that text. Sometime in the 1890s, he emigrated to the U.S.
Right, just a quick little bullet point.
Exactly. But that singular decision by John Patrick Charde completely shifted the geographical destiny of your family. It severed a physical tie to the coast of Cork and planted a new route system that would eventually result in a sales manager raising a family in Missouri in 1945.
The scale of that single decision really is staggering. But before we get to the 1890s, the sources provide us with a highly detailed breakdown of how 19th century Ireland was actually structured. And looking at the provided documentation regarding the internal divisions in 19th century Ireland, it becomes clear that locating an ancestor in this era was just an incredibly complex undertaking.
Oh, it's a nightmare for researchers if you don't understand the system.
The geographical boundaries seem less like a standard map and more like a record of centuries of political conflict.
That is exactly the right way to frame it. If a genealogist wants to find your ancestors, they must navigate overlapping systems of boundaries that were created centuries apart by entirely different civilizations. The documentation you provided outlines this beautifully, showing how English colonial administration essentially mapped itself directly over ancient Gaelic structures.
Let's walk through this geography of time then, starting with the largest divisions, the provinces. The document tells us there are 4: Ulster, Leinster, Connaught, and Munster. But these weren't just arbitrary lines drawn by a modern surveyor, were they?
Not at all. These names are direct derivatives of the ancient kingdoms of Ireland: Ulad, Lagan, Connaught, and Mumha. The text even notes there used to be a 5th ancient kingdom, Meath, which eventually merged into the province of Leinster.
So the very largest geographical boundaries a researcher deals with are literally echoes of ancient Gaelic royalty.
Exactly. They are ancient. And we know your ancestors, the Chardes, lived in the south in the province of Munster.
But within those ancient provinces, we find the counties. And this is where the English administrative influence begins to formally take shape, right?
Precisely. The division of Ireland into counties did not originate from the ancient Irish kings. It was initiated by the English King John in the year 1210.
1210, that is a long time ago.
Very long. He constituted 12 of the present-day counties, establishing Dublin, Kildare, Meath, Louth, Carlow, Kilkenny, Wexford, Waterford, Cork, Kerry, Limerick, and Tipperary.
So County Cork, the specific region your family is from, has been officially recognized as a county since 1210. That is over 800 years of continuous bureaucratic existence.
And the county system just kept expanding as English control over the island solidified. The source text notes that kings and queens counties were formed under Queen Mary. Then, under Queen Elizabeth I, the administration formalized Longford, Clare, Galway, Sligo, Mayo, Roscommon, Leitrim, Armagh, Monaghan, Tyrone, Derry, Donegal, Fermanagh, and Cavan.
So it was a gradual rollout of English civic structure.
Yeah, and the final county to be formed was Wicklow, which was divided off from Dublin in 1605.
Okay, so we have ancient provinces containing these English counties, but the administration goes even deeper. Within the counties, we have the baronies, and the source material states, the barony is a division of great antiquity based on the great Gaelic family holdings.
Right.
It says there are 325 baronies in all of Ireland. How did these ancient family holdings function within the 19th century English system?
It's a fascinating example of administrative pragmatism, or perhaps colonial efficiency is a better term. The baronies were originally the territories held by powerful ancient Irish clans. In the 19th century, the English administration didn't attempt to erase these deep-seated local boundaries. Instead, they repurposed them.
They just used what was already there.
Exactly. They turned these ancient tribal territories into civil divisions specifically utilized for the purpose of land valuations and taxation. It's a literal mapping of colonization, co-opting the infrastructure of the old regime to serve the new one.
That creates such a complex layer of historical friction, and yet the subdivisions continue. Below the baronies, the document outlines the parishes, but it explicitly states there are two distinct types of parishes that researchers must navigate.
Yes, and this is where the bureaucratic friction becomes a very real obstacle for historical research. You have ecclesiastical parishes, which are the religious boundaries,
The Catholic Church boundaries.
right? Mostly. And then you have civil parishes. The text points out that the civil parish was utilized for state valuations and was normally smaller in area than the church parishes. Furthermore, it often had a completely different name.
That is wild.
There are roughly 2,500 ecclesiastical parishes in the country, but the civil map might look entirely different.
Wait, so if I'm a researcher looking for a baptismal record versus a tax record, am I essentially looking at two completely different maps of the exact same town?
You are. You are looking at a religious map overlaying a civil tax map, and they frequently disagree on boundaries and nomenclature. It was a massive headache for genealogists, but it was the lived reality for the people residing there.
It must have been so confusing.
And below the parishes, we reach the smallest division mentioned in the sources, the townland.
The townland. The document describes it as a small rural division of the parish, and the source says the average area of a townland was just 350 acres.
Very small.
Yeah, and by the time of the 1901 census, there were 60,462 townlands in Ireland.
That level of granularity is incredible to consider. 350 acres is roughly half a square mile. A townland is essentially a neighborhood or a small cluster of interconnected farms. For people living in rural 19th century Ireland, your townland was your immediate total universe. It was the specific, named patch of earth to which you belonged.
To add one final layer of administrative complexity to this landscape, the sources detail the creation of the Poor Law Unions.
Okay, yes.
Under the Poor Law Relief Act of 1838, the country was divided into these districts. The local ratepayers, meaning the people who actually held property or wealth, were made financially responsible for the care of the paupers in their specific area.
These unions were geographically drawn as a 10-mile radius around a large market town, and situated in the center of that market town was the poorhouse. The text notes that most of these massive stone structures can still be seen today, though they're often repurposed now.
Right, they aren't poorhouses anymore.
No. But in the 19th century, the poorhouse loomed incredibly large in the psyche of the Irish working class. It represented the absolute end of the line. If you lost your land, your livelihood, or your family support system, that 10-mile radius dictated which specific poorhouse you would be remanded to.
So when we talk about the Charde family living in County Cork, we really have to understand they were navigating this dense, invisible grid of overlapping authorities every day. They lived in the province of Munster, the county of Cork, and specifically, as the genealogical report shows, within the civil parishes of Clonmel and Templerobin.
Which encompassed the town of Cobb.
Exactly. And understanding this geography of time is absolutely essential for the next phase of our analysis, because the listener provided a professional genealogical report from the Hibernian Research Company, based in Dublin. And reading this report reveals just how difficult it is to penetrate this historical grid.
Because the grid wasn't designed to make things easy for modern genealogists.
Definitely not. The researchers at Hibernian had a highly specific mission: locate the Charde family in 19th century Cork. But they immediately encountered a massive structural barrier. The report, which is labeled with the reference C.718GL, outlines the fundamental problem of Irish genealogy right at the beginning. It states, civil registration of births, Catholic marriages and deaths did not become compulsory in Ireland until 1864.
This point forces us to reconsider how we view historical records entirely. We take state-issued vital statistics like Luke's 1945 birth certificate from Missouri entirely for granted today.
Right, you're born, you get a piece of paper from the government.
Exactly. But in Ireland, prior to 1864, if you were a Catholic citizen, the government simply did not officially record your birth or your death. You existed almost entirely outside the state's vital statistical apparatus.
The report does clarify that non-Catholic marriages started being registered in 1845, but for the vast majority of the population, the government just wasn't maintaining those individual life markers. So if the state wasn't recording births and deaths, how did the detectives proceed? The report states, Before these dates, reliance must be placed on parish registers. However, before diving into the church vaults, the researchers attempted another route. They checked the index of surnames for County Cork.
A very logical first step.
Yeah, and this index is based on two major 19th century land surveys, Griffith's Primary Valuation of Lands and Tenements and the Tithe Allotment.
These were monumental tax surveys. The government systematically evaluated every one of those 60,000 townlands we just discussed, recording who was holding land and determining its taxable value. There are 3 massive volumes dedicated just to County Cork alone, divided into southwest, east, and northwest regions.
And Cobb is situated in East Cork.
Correct.
So the genealogist consulted the volume for East Cork, searched the index for the surname Charde or Charde, and found nothing. The report is very explicit here. It says, no Charde or Charde families occur in the index of surnames for Cork East, which simply means that the family somehow escaped inclusion in both land surveys.
Which is a huge roadblock.
I have to ask, how does a family just vanish from two of the most comprehensive, meticulous tax surveys in the history of the country? We know they lived there. We have the later records proving it. So why weren't they documented by the tax assessors?
It's a genuine historical mystery, but looking at the mechanics of those surveys offers a few plausible explanations. Griffith's valuation generally focused on recording the primary occupier of the land, meaning the individual holding the lease or owning the property outright.
Okay.
So if the Chardes were subletting a small room or living as lodgers in a busy boarding house in the port town of Cobb, they might not have qualified as primary occupiers in the eyes of the surveyors.
They just wouldn't make the list.
Right. Alternatively, their specific professions might have meant they resided in housing provided by an employer, meaning the property was taxed under the employer's name, not theirs. And then, of course, there's also the ever-present reality of bureaucratic error.
Just human mistakes.
Exactly. The surveyors might have simply bypassed them or misspelled the surname so egregiously that it was never filed in the C section of the index to begin with.
Whatever the precise reason, the official state tax records yielded absolutely nothing. The Chardes were officially off the grid. Consequently, the researchers pivoted to their last remaining option, the Catholic parish registers of Cobb, specifically the civil parishes of Clonmel and Temple Robin.
And we really should contextualize what consulting these registers actually entails. The researchers explicitly note at the conclusion of their report that parish registers are in longhand and unindexed, and checking them is time-consuming.
They aren't just typing a name into a search bar.
No, not at all. They are physically examining fragile, handwritten ledgers in a church archive, scanning line by line, page by page for any mention of the family name.
It's incredible detective work, and their painstaking work paid off. The baptismal and marriage registers for Cobb Parish had survived, with records dating back to 1812. Within those unindexed pages, the genealogists finally uncovered the patriarchs of your family.
Yes, let's begin with the oldest confirmed ancestor detail in these records. This is Richard Charde. Based on a transcription of his gravestone provided in the source materials, we know Richard died on September 2nd, 1872.
And it notes he died at the age of 68.
Right.
So doing the basic math on that, it means Richard Charde was born around the year 1804. He married a woman named Mary Ann Hortigan, and we know from that exact same gravestone transcription that Mary Ann died on May 21st, 1847.
Only 35 years old.
Yeah. And the year of her death, 1847.
It carries an immense, grim significance.
It really does. In Irish history, that year is universally known as Black 47.
Yep.
It was the absolute nadir of the Great Famine. Disease, starvation, and societal collapse were ravaging the entire island. While the sources don't specify the exact cause of Mary Ann's death at such a young age, it is an inescapable fact that she died in the epicenter of a profound national trauma.
It is a very sobering detail to uncover in a family tree. But the records also reveal Richard's profession, which might have played a significant role in how the family navigated that era. In the marriage records of his son, Richard Charde is listed as a customs officer.
A customs officer.
Yes, and that profession is a critical piece of context regarding the family's social and economic standing. The town they resided in, Queenstown, which eventually reverted to its older name of Cobb in 1920, was one of the most vital ports in the entire British Empire.
Because of the Deepwater Harbor.
Exactly. It boasted a deepwater harbor that serviced military fleets, merchant vessels, and massive transatlantic passenger liners. Serving as a customs officer in Queenstown meant Richard held a formal, government-affiliated position. He possessed a stable, salaried occupation in a town whose entire economy was dictated by maritime trade.
Having a salaried government position in a major port city during the 1840s would certainly offer a layer of financial insulation that rural agricultural workers simply did not have.
Without a doubt.
So Richard and Marianne had a son, John P. Charde. John was born around 1835. He remarkably outlived both his parents by several decades, eventually passing away on May 2nd, 1920.
The fact that John lived until 1920 means his life spanned an incredible arc of history. He survived the famine era, lived through the entirety of the First World War, and witnessed the beginnings of the Irish War of Independence.
An amazing timeline to live through.
And we were able to construct a surprisingly detailed picture of John's life because of the trade directories included in your sources. These directories essentially functioned as the commercial phone books of the 19th century.
The details in these old directories are just fascinating. In the 1875 directory for Queenstown, under the categorization for painters and glaziers, we find an entry, Charde John Custom House.
Showing that tie to his father's workplace, perhaps.
Yeah. Then, moving forward 36 years to the 1911 directory, under the heading for painters, we find him listed again. Charde John, 10 Ferry Street, undertaker. A painter and an undertaker. Those feel like entirely different, almost contradictory worlds. Was that a common professional combination in the early 1900s, or was John simply taking on whatever varied work he could secure in a port town?
To a modern observer, it certainly sounds like a bizarre juxtaposition. But in the context of 19th and early 20th century civic life, tradesmen frequently combined highly complementary physical skills.
How so?
Well, if an individual is a master painter and glazier, they possess an intimate understanding of woodworking, varnishing, sealing, and fine detailing. The exact same craftsmanship required to build, glaze, and beautifully paint a high-end cabinet or a storefront is required to construct and finish a coffin.
Oh, wow, that makes complete logical sense when you break down the actual labor involved.
Exactly. In many towns, the local carpenter, furniture maker, or master painter naturally evolved into the role of the undertaker, simply because they were the only individuals with the tools and expertise to manufacture the necessary physical goods.
That is such a great piece of historical context.
What this tells us about John P. Charde is that he was a highly skilled craftsman, an adaptable entrepreneur, and someone who was deeply embedded in the civic fabric of Queenstown. From decorating their homes and businesses to burying their dead, he was an essential, highly visible figure in the community.
And the genealogical report provides the exact date John started his own family. The researchers located his marriage record within the Cobb Catholic registers. On July 26, 1856, John P. Charde married Margaret Dowling. The official witnesses to the marriage were James Lawless and Mary Gribble.
And this marriage initiates what is perhaps the most staggering sequence of data contained within all your source materials.
I completely agree. The physical reality of their expanding family tree is almost hard to comprehend. Between the years 1857 and 1874, John and Margaret had a child almost every single year.
Every single year.
The researchers successfully pulled the baptismal records, and we have the complete list. I want to read these names because every single one of them represents a distinct piece of your family's historical narrative.
Please do.
First was Richard, born in 1857, then Hugh in 1858, Mary A. in 1860, Margaret in 1862, John Patrick, your direct great-grandfather, born January 24th, 1864. Then came Jeremiah in 1865, Michael William in 1867, Jane in 1869, Matthew in 1871, Helena in 1872, and finally Joseph in 1874.
That is 11 children born within a span of just 17 years.
The level of physical endurance required to manage that household is almost unimaginable to me, especially when you confront the next piece of data. Margaret Dowling Charde died on January 3rd, 1877. She was only 38 years old.
It paints a vivid, deeply tragic picture of the reality of women's lives in the 19th century. To be pregnant or nursing almost continuously for the entirety of your adult life and then to pass away before reaching the age of 40.
It's devastating.
The maternal toll was immense and unyielding, and her death left John P. Charde, the master painter and undertaker, as a widower managing a household filled with children ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers.
The sources indicate that John did eventually remarry. The civil marriage registers from 1882 show that John P. Charde, described as a widower and master painter living at Bishop St. Queenstown, married Honora Barry. She is listed as the daughter of a deceased baker named Cornelius Barry.
And there is a highly specific genealogical methodology the researchers utilized regarding John and Margaret's children, which perfectly illustrates how experts navigate the vast gaps in historical documentation. Notice the name of the very first child born to John and Margaret in 1857, They named him Richard.
Which matches the name of John's father, the customs officer.
That is not a coincidence. The report explicitly details this methodology, stating, as it was customary in Ireland for a man to name his first son after his father, it was assumed that John Charde's father may have been named Richard.
So they guessed it before they found the grave.
Exactly. They utilized this cultural naming pattern as a working hypothesis before they ever located the gravestone transcription that confirmed it. It is a vital, practical tool. When the state tax records fail and the civil registries have not yet been established, genealogists must rely on deeply ingrained cultural traditions to point them in the correct direction.
The cultural naming customs essentially provided the map when the bureaucracy failed. But as we survey this massive family of 11 children, our narrative needs to narrow its focus. We must follow the diverging paths of two specific brothers from this generation, the two individuals specifically highlighted in Mike's yellow letter. John Patrick, born in 1864, and his older brother Hugh, born in 1858.
These two brothers perfectly encapsulate the great dichotomy of the Irish experience in the late 19th century, the choice between leaving and staying.
Let's examine John Patrick's path first. Mike's letter states quite plainly that sometime in the 1890s he emigrated to the U.S.
The 1890s in Ireland represented a period of continuous systemic emigration. The nation had never truly recovered, either economically or psychologically, from the devastation of the famine 50 years prior. For a young man in his late 20s, even one hailing from a relatively stable family of skilled tradesmen, the economic ceiling in a provincial town like Queenstown was inherently low.
There just weren't enough opportunities.
Right. However, the town's primary asset, the port itself, offered a direct solution. Every single day, John Patrick would have witnessed massive steamships departing the harbor, filled with passengers bound for New York, Boston, and beyond.
He was essentially living in the departure lounge of the country. And eventually, he secured a ticket and took that immense leap across the ocean. And because he made that specific choice in the 1890s, generations later, Luke Michael Charde was born in a hospital in Missouri in 1945. It is a direct chain of cause and effect spanning an ocean and a century.
But we must also consider the older brother, Hugh, who made the opposite choice. Hugh stayed in Ireland. And Mike's letter provides us with a truly remarkable detail regarding both of their lives. It says, they both had students in the Cork School of Art. Some painting by Hugh are within. The curators at the Cork Art Gallery were very accommodating and pulled out of archives painting by him.
The fact that they attended the Cork School of Art is a detail I find absolutely incredible. We are discussing the sons of a practical painter and undertaker in a busy maritime port, and they are receiving formal education in the fine arts.
It implies several significant things about the family's trajectory. First, it suggests the family possessed the financial means to support formal education. John P., the master painter, clearly operated a successful enough enterprise to allow his sons to pursue artistic training rather than immediately forcing them into manual labor.
That speaks to his success as a tradesman.
It does. Secondly, it demonstrates a fascinating generational evolution of a specific trade. The father was a highly skilled, practical painter glazing windows, painting storefronts, varnishing coffins. The sons absorbed that foundational, utilitarian understanding of color, materials, and brushwork, and elevated it into the realm of fine art. They transitioned from the scaffolding of the town to the canvas of the academy.
And Hugh was clearly a deeply talented individual. His artistic work was deemed significant enough to be formally preserved in the permanent archives of the Cork Art Gallery. The image of Mike, decades later, walking into that gallery, speaking with the curators, and having them physically pull his great-uncle's paintings from the vaults. It gives the entire history a profound, tangible reality.
It serves as the ultimate validation of a life's work. Hugh chose not to cross an ocean to build a legacy in a new world. Instead, he painted his legacy directly onto the cultural fabric of his home city.
That physical connection to the local landscape is a recurring theme in Mike's letter. Mike doesn't just list the genealogical facts, he provides a literal travel guide to the family's geographical memory. He writes, Cobb is on the water. Behind it, up the hill, is a cemetery which has one or more shards in it.
The visual geography he describes is incredibly evocative. Cobb is architecturally built on a steep incline, rising directly up from the harbor. You have the bustling town at the bottom, the very docks where John Patrick would have stood to leave for America, and looming above all of it is the cemetery where Richard the customs officer, Margaret, who died so young at 38, and John the master painter are all interred.
It's like they're looking out over the water.
The resting place of the family literally overlooks the harbor, positioned as if watching the ships depart.
It is a deeply cinematic image, and Mike concludes with one final remarkable detail regarding how the family is remembered locally. He writes about the Commodore Hotel, noting, "The lobby in the Commodore Hotel had a few photos that had shards depicted and labeled 20 plus years ago. Still there."
This point circles back perfectly to our earlier discussion regarding official state records versus lived civic experience. The professional genealogists could not locate the shards in the comprehensive government tax surveys of the 1850s. They were administratively invisible.
But not locally invisible.
Exactly. If you walked into the lobby of the prominent local hotel, there they were, hanging prominently on the wall, depicted and labeled. A family's true historical footprint isn't solely contained in the archives in Dublin. It resides in the civic memory of the town itself. They were known. They were an integral part of local scenery.
They were quite literally woven into the fabric of Queenstown. Let's take a moment to reflect on the immense journey we've navigated through your sources today. We began with a single piece of paper recording the birth of a baby boy, Luke Michael Charde, in Missouri in 1945. To comprehend how he arrived there, we had to travel backward to an island intricately divided by ancient Gaelic baronies and repurposed English counties.
We had to dig through unindexed parish registers.
We uncovered a customs officer navigating the busiest port in the empire during the devastating years of the famine. We discovered a master painter who also served his community by burying the dead. We witnessed the tragic, immense toll of a mother bearing 11 children, and we followed the diverging paths of two brothers, one who crossed the Atlantic to initiate a new lineage in America, and one who remained to paint the world he knew, leaving his artistic legacy in the city's vaults.
And we must emphasize to you, the listener, this is not an abstract exploration of general history. This is not a documentary concerning strangers. This is the highly specific, deeply documented chain of survival, craftsmanship, and migration that directly resulted in your existence.
Your exact history.
The genetic code of a talented Cork School of Art student and the sheer physical resilience of a Queenstown master painter are quite literally the foundation of your family tree.
It is the ultimate narrative of human connection across time.
It truly is. And reviewing all this material leaves me with a final lingering thought. It brings us back to Mike and that faded yellow legal pad. He wrote that he kept the entire folder together just for togetherness purposes, having officially abandoned his pursuit of the citizenship application.
Right.
He likely viewed the folder as a failed, unfinished project. But in abandoning that specific bureaucratic goal, he accidentally created something vastly more valuable than a modern passport. He created a highly tactile time capsule that successfully survived to reach you. And it forces me to consider our own lives today. We no longer curate dusty folders of physical paper. So what mundane digital folders, what scattered emails or half-organized cloud photo albums are we casually abandoning right now?
That's a great point.
And what will a genealogist 150 years from now be able to reconstruct about our daily lives from the digital scraps we leave behind?
A brilliant question to leave us pondering. Thank you for sharing your history with us.